The cold metal walls of Station Omega-7 hummed with quiet energy. Commander Jake Morrison walked down the long hallway, his boots making soft sounds on the polished floor. He had seen many things in his 20 years of service, but today felt different. Today he would listen to something that might change how the galaxy saw his people forever. Dr. Lisa Grant was already waiting in the interview room when Jake arrived. She looked up from her notes and gave him a small nod. Lisa had spent years studying alien minds, but this case was special. The being they were about to interview had fought against humans in the war. Now it wanted to tell its story. The door opened with a soft hiss, and 2 guards brought in the alien. Zekthara moved slowly into the room, its 4 legs making clicking sounds on the floor. The creature stood about 7 feet tall, with dark green skin that looked like armor. Scars covered its body, and one of its 4 eyes had been replaced. With a metal device that glowed with red light, Jake had read the files, but seeing Zekthara in person was different. This being had commanded thousands of soldiers. It had conquered worlds for the Vorthan Empire. Now it sat carefully in the specially made chair, its clawed hands folded in what humans would call a respectful pose. Lisa activated the recording device on the table. A small blue light began to blink, showing that everything would be saved for history. She looked at Zekthara and spoke in the slow, careful way that made translation easier. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with us," Lisa said. "The Galactic Council wants to understand what happened during the war. Your words will help bring peace between our peoples." Zekthara's remaining natural eyes blinked in sequence. Something Jake had learned meant agreement in Vorthan culture. When the alien spoke, its voice came through a translation device that made it sound flat and emotionless. "I will tell you what I saw," Zekthara said. "I will tell you why my empire surrendered to a species we thought was weak. I will tell you why my soldiers still wake up screaming in the night." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard stories from his own people about the war, tales of brave humans fighting impossible odds, but he had never heard it from the other side. "Let us start at the beginning," Lisa said, her voice gentle but firm. "Tell us about the first time the Vorthan Empire encountered humans." Zekthara was quiet for a long moment. Its cybernetic eye, word as it focused on something beyond the walls of the room. When it spoke again, there was something like sadness in its translated voice. "We found your people 3 years ago, by your counting of time. Our scouts reported a young species, on a single world, with small colonies on nearby planets. Your technology was interesting, but not advanced. Your population was small. According to our computers, conquest would take perhaps 2 of your months." The alien paused and looked directly at Jake. "We had conquered 47 species before. Yours? Some fought bravely, some surrendered quickly. All of them followed the same patterns. All of them made sense to us." "What do you mean by patterns?" Lisa asked, making notes on her tablet. "When we attack, other species do what we expect," Zekthara explained. "Their military leaders try to save their soldiers. Their governments try to make deals. Their people flee or hide. They think about survival in ways we understand." Jake kept his face neutral, but inside he was starting to understand where this was going. Humans had not followed those patterns. "Our first target was your colony on Kepler 4-4b," Zekthara continued. "You called it New Austin. It was a farming world with maybe 50,000 people. We brought 3 ships and 2,000 soldiers, more than enough for such a small place." Lisa looked up from her notes. "What happened when you arrived?" "At first, everything went as planned. Your defense ships were destroyed in minutes. We landed our troops and took the main settlement within hours. The colonists ran into the countryside as expected. We thought the hard part was over." Shifted in its chair, and Jake noticed that its hands had begun to shake slightly. "We were wrong. So very wrong." "How long did it take for things to change?" Jake asked, speaking for the first time since the interview began. 3 days, Zekthara said immediately. The alien described how the Vorthan forces had set up their command center in New Austin's City Hall. They had posted guards and established patrol routes, following procedures that had worked on dozens of other worlds. Everything seemed under control. On the fourth morning, my soldiers found something painted on the wall of our command building. Zekthara said, "Words in your language." The translator told us it said, "Welcome to hell." We did not understand what it meant then. Jake did understand. Some human had snuck past armed guards, surveillance systems, and motion detectors just to leave a message. Not to attack or sabotage, but to let the enemy know they were being watched. That same day, our supply convoy disappeared, Zekthara continued. 8 vehicles, 40 soldiers, completely gone. Found the vehicles later, burned and empty. The soldiers were never found. Lisa made another note. "Did you think it was a planned military operation?" "We thought so at first. We increased patrols and brought in more troops. But the attacks kept happening, and they made no sense. Food stores would explode, but the explosives were made from farming tools. Communication towers would fall down. But the damage was caused by equipment we had seen humans use to harvest crops." The alien's cybernetic eye focused on Jake again. "Your people were not fighting like soldiers. They were fighting like something else, something we had no training to face." Jake remained silent, but he thought about the reports he had read. Captain Ben Hayes had been in command of New Austin's small defense force. When the orbital defenses fell, Hayes had not surrendered or retreated. Instead, he had scattered his 30 soldiers among the civilian population and begun a campaign that the Vorthons were still trying to understand. "Tell us about the civilian population," Lisa said. "How did they behave?" "That was the worst part," Zekthara said, and for the first time its translation device picked up what sounded like emotion. "Other species try to avoid harm to their non-fighters. Your people seemed to think every person was a fighter." The interview room fell quiet except for the hum of the recording device. Jake knew this was the heart of what made humans different in the eyes of their enemies. Other species had civilians and soldiers. Humans had people who would fight, and people who would fight harder. "The farmers did not act like farmers," Zekthara said slowly. "The teachers did not act like teachers. They all acted like they had been waiting their whole lives for us to arrive." Lisa leaned forward in her chair, her pen ready to capture every word. Zekthara had been sitting quietly for several minutes, its cybernetic eye making small clicking sounds as it processed memories. Jake could see that talking about the war was difficult for the alien, but he needed to hear this story. "Tell us more about the resistance," Lisa said gently. "What happened after those first attacks?" Zekthara's natural eyes blinked in that strange pattern again. When it spoke, its voice came through the translator with what almost sounded like fear. "We brought more soldiers. Many more. By the end of the first week, we had 5,000 troops on New Austin. We thought numbers would solve our problem." The alien shifted in its chair, its claws scratching against the metal armrests. "Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez was the one who taught us we were wrong." Jake recognized the name from the military records. Amy Rodriguez had been a young officer in the Colonial Defense Force, fresh out of the academy with no real combat experience. On paper, she should have been no threat to a professional alien army. "Rodriguez had been a farmer before she joined your military," Zekthara continued. "She knew every tunnel, every cave, every hidden place on that world. But more than that, She understood something we did not. What did she understand? Lisa asked. She understood that we were not just fighting her soldiers, we were fighting her home. Zekthara described how the attacks became more coordinated, but also more personal. Food stores would explode, but only the ones containing Vorthan rations. Communication equipment would fail, but always during shift changes when it would cause the most confusion. Vehicles would break down, but in ways that looked like accidents until they happened too many times to ignore. Oh, the worst part was not knowing who was fighting us, the alien said. During the day, we would see humans working in their fields, fixing their machines, teaching their children. They would nod to our patrols and seem harmless. But at night, these same people became ghosts. Jake listened as Zekthara told them about the tunnel networks. Humans had been digging beneath New Austin for months before the invasion, using mining equipment to create passages that connected every important building in the colony. The Vorthans had sensors that could detect large movements underground, but the humans moved in small groups, crawling through spaces barely wide enough for a person. We would secure a building completely with guards at every door and sensors watching every window, Zekthara said. In the morning, we would find our equipment destroyed and messages painted on the walls. The humans could appear anywhere and disappear just as quickly. Lisa made notes as the alien described the psychological warfare. Speakers would play human music at random times during the night, always just loud enough to wake sleeping soldiers, but too quiet to locate the source. Vorthan patrols would find their own weapons arranged in strange patterns, showing that someone had been close enough to touch them while they slept. Rodriguez left us recordings, Zekthara said, its voice growing quieter. She would speak to us in our own language, telling us about the people we were fighting. She told us about Maria Santos, who had lost her husband in our first attack, but still smiled when she served food to our soldiers during the day. She told us about old Frank Miller, who had fought in human wars decades before and was teaching children how to make explosives from kitchen supplies. Jake felt his chest tighten as he listened. These were not professional soldiers or trained guerrilla fighters. These were ordinary people who had decided that surrender was not an option.
Oh.
Recordings were the worst part, Zekthara continued. Rodriguez would tell us that we were not fighting an army. We were fighting a family. Every human we killed had parents, children, friends, who would take their place. She said that even if we killed every human on New Austin, their memory would make the planet itself our enemy. The alien described how the Vorthan forces began to break down. Soldiers who had conquered worlds without losing sleep began to show signs of stress. They jumped at shadows and fired at their own reflections. Some refused to go on patrol alone, even though Vorthon warriors were trained to work independently. Intercepted a message from your Colonel Sam Peters, Zekthara said. He was coordinating with other human worlds, teaching them what Rodriguez had learned. We realized that every planet we conquered would become like New Austin. Lisa looked up from her notes. How did your commanders respond to this? They sent more ships, more soldiers. But they also sent specialists, psychologists, to study human behavior, torture experts to break captured humans, scientists to develop new weapons. Zekthara paused, its cybernetic eye focusing on something neither human could see. None of it worked. Your people seemed to expect everything we tried. Worse, they adapted to our new tactics faster than we could develop them. The alien told them about the failed assault on the human stronghold in the northern mountains. The Vorthons had brought their best troops and newest equipment, confident they could end the resistance with one decisive battle. Instead, they found themselves fighting in terrain that seemed designed to kill them. The humans had turned the entire mountain into a weapon, Zekthara said. Every trail was a trap. Every cave was a fortress. Every rock could hide an enemy. We lost 800 soldiers in 3 days and never even saw the main human force. Jake knew this story from the human side. The Battle of Copper Ridge had been taught in military schools as an example of perfect defensive strategy. But hearing it from the alien perspective made it sound like something from a nightmare. Rodriguez sent us one final message after Copper Ridge, Zekthara said. She said that humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years and had learned every possible way to kill and survive. She said that war was not just something humans did, but something they were. The interview room was completely quiet now, except for the sound of Lisa's pen on paper. Jake found himself thinking about his own species with new eyes. Had humans really been that terrifying to face in battle? How long did the fighting on New Austin continue? Lisa asked. For months, Zekthura said immediately. For months of hell. When we finally pulled our forces off that world, we had lost over 3,000 soldiers. The humans had lost maybe 500 people, but they had turned every remaining human into a weapon pointed at our hearts. The alien looked directly at Jake again. Your species did not just resist us. You made resistance into an art form. Every day we stayed on New Austin, we became weaker, and your people became stronger. Zekthara described the evacuation from Zekthar D. New Austin. How Vorthan soldiers who had conquered dozens of worlds were relieved to leave a single human farming colony. As their ships lifted off, the humans had painted a new message on every building in the settlement. What did the message say? Jake asked. See you soon, Zekthara said. And its translation device somehow managed to convey the chill those words had sent through the Vorthan fleet. Jake watched as Zekthara's claws gripped the chair arms tighter. The alien had been talking for over an hour, but Jake could see that the hardest part of the story was still coming. Lisa noticed it too, and poured water into a cup designed for Vorthan anatomy. Take your time, Lisa said softly. We know this is difficult. Zekthara drank slowly, then looked at both humans with its remaining natural eyes. What I told you about New Austin was just the beginning. The real horror started. When we thought we had won everything. The alien explained how the Vorthan fleet had moved through human space after leaving New Austin. They conquered 12 more colonies in 2 months, each victory coming faster than the last. The humans seemed unable to mount any real defense against the full power of the Vorthan war machine. We celebrated, Zekthora said. Our commanders told us that New Austin had been a special case, that most humans would not fight so hard. We thought we had learned their tricks and could handle any resistance. Jake knew what was coming next. Every human in the galaxy knew about the Battle of Europa Station, but he had never heard it told from the alien side. Tell us about Admiral Kate Sullivan, Lisa said, her pen ready. Zekthara made a sound that the translator could not convert, something between a growl and a whimper. Sullivan was supposed to be dead. Our intelligence said she died when we destroyed the human fleet at Proxima Station. Her ship was blown apart. No one could have survived. The alien described how the Vorthan forces had gathered at Europa Station, a human mining facility built into one of Jupiter's moons. It was the largest human installation outside of Earth itself. Taking it would give the Vorthons control of the entire outer solar system. We brought our entire invasion fleet, Zekthara said. 40 ships, 20,000 soldiers. The humans had maybe 50 fighters and a few thousand workers. It should have been our greatest victory, but Admiral Kate Sullivan had other plans. She appeared out of the asteroid belt with a fleet that should not have existed, ships that the Vorthans had already destroyed mixed with civilian vessels that had no business in a war zone. The first sign something was wrong came from our sensors, Zekthara continued. The human ships were not running away. They were not trying to escape or find help. They were coming straight at us, and they were accelerating. It could read the tactical reports. Sullivan's improvised fleet had included mining ships, cargo haulers, and even passenger liners. None of them were designed for combat, but Sullivan had turned them into weapons anyway. Your admiral opened communication channels with our fleet commander, Zekthara said. She told him that humans had a saying about fighting in space. Said that in space, everyone can hear you scream. The battle that followed broke every rule of space warfare that the Vorthons understood. Human ships rammed Vorthan vessels instead of trying to outmaneuver them. Cargo ships filled with explosives detonated next to alien battleships. Mining vessels used their industrial equipment as weapons, cutting through enemy hulls with tools designed to break apart asteroids. Sullivan's ship was a civilian liner called the Aurora, Zekthara said, which had mounted weapons on it, but it was still just a passenger ship. When our flagship disabled her engines, we thought she was finished. Lisa looked up from her notes. What happened then? She used the ship's emergency thrusters to crash into our command vessel. But before impact, she launched every escape pod filled with human soldiers directly into our hull. They cut their way inside and fought through the ship while it was still exploding around them. Kea described the chaos that followed. Human boarding parties fought with a desperation that terrified the Vorthon crews. When their weapons ran out, they used whatever they could find. When they were wounded, they kept fighting until they died. Major Ryan Clark was leading one of the boarding teams, the alien said. We cornered his group in our ammunition storage. He could have surrendered. Instead, he detonated the entire storage bay, taking 300 of our soldiers with him. Jake felt a chill as he listened. He'd known Ryan Clark personally, had served with him on a training mission years before the war. Ryan had been a quiet man who loved to read books and play chess. Hearing about his final moments made the war feel more real and more terrible. The worst part was your prisoners, Zekthara continued, its voice growing even quieter. Other species, when we capture their soldiers, they accept their fate. They wait for rescue or exchange.
Yeah.
Your people never stopped fighting. The alien told them about Sergeant Nina Foster, who had been captured during the early fighting at Europa Station. The Vorthans had put her in their most secure prison cell, with guards watching her constantly. Foster organized the other human prisoners, Zekthara said. She taught them to pick locks using pieces of their uniforms. She showed them how to make weapons from food trays and bedding. Every few days, a group of prisoners would escape, and Foster would already be planning the next breakout. Lisa made careful notes as Zekthara described the psychological effect this had on the Vorthan guards. They began to fear their prisoners more than enemy soldiers. Some refused to enter the human cells alone. Others requested transfers to frontline combat units because it seemed safer than guarding captured humans. Foster escaped 7 times, the alien said. 7 times we recaptured her, and 7 times she began planning her next escape. The last time, she took 43 other prisoners. With her and stole one of our transport ships, Jeek knew the rest of that story. Foster and her fellow escapees had flown their stolen ship back to human lines, providing intelligence that helped turn the tide of several battles. But what impressed him most was hearing how she had never given up, even when capture seemed permanent. Our commanders began to understand that we were not fighting a normal war, Zekthara said.
Every battle we won cost us more than losing would have cost other species.
Every prisoner we took became a problem. Every world we conquered became a source of new enemies. The alien described how Vorthan soldiers began to develop strange symptoms. Warriors who had fought for decades without fear started to refuse certain missions. Medical officers reported a new condition they called human syndrome, where soldiers would wake up screaming about enemies who never stopped coming. General Marcus Webb sent us a message after Europa Station, Zekthara said. He told us that humans had been preparing for this war for their entire history. Every fight they had ever fought with each other had been practiced for fighting us. Lisa looked up from her notes. What did he mean by that? He said that humans had spent thousands of years learning how to kill each other, and now they were going to use that knowledge on us. He said that every human who died would be replaced by 2 who fought harder. He said that surrender was not a word in any human language. The interview room was silent for a long moment. Jake found himself thinking about his own species with a mixture of pride and something close to fear. Had humans really been that terrifying to face? How did your empire respond to this message? Lisa asked. Zekthara, cybernetic I-word, as it focused on the wall behind them. Our high command ordered a final assault on Earth itself. They said that if we could take your homeworld, the war would end. The alien paused, and Jake could see that this part of the story was the most difficult to tell. They were wrong. Zekthara said simply,
Us.
Earth was not the end of your resistance.
Us.
It was where your resistance began. The recording device had been running for hours, its blue light blinking steadily as Zekthara reached the end of its terrible story. Jake could see that the alien was exhausted, but there was still one more chapter to tell. The most important. 1. The assault on Earth, Lisa said gently. Tell us what happened when your fleet reached the human homeworld. Zekthara was quiet for a long time. It's cybernetic. I made clicking sounds as it processed memories that clearly caused pain. When it finally spoke, its voice was barely above a whisper. "We brought everything," the alien said. "Every ship, every soldier, every weapon in the Vorthan Empire. 150 vessels, 60,000 troops. Our commander said that even humans could not resist such force." Jake knew the numbers from the human side. Earth's defenses had been badly damaged by earlier raids. The planet had maybe 30 functional warships and a few thousand regular soldiers. On paper, it should have been the end of human resistance. "But you had been preparing," Zekthara continued. "Not just your military, but every human on Earth. When our scouts reached your solar system, we found something we had never seen before." The alien described how Earth had been transformed into a fortress. Every city had been turned into a defensive position. Every citizen had been given weapons and training. The humans had not just prepared to defend their world, they had prepared to make conquering it cost more than any victory could be worth. "General Marcus Webb contacted our fleet when we entered Earth orbit," Zekthara said. "He welcomed us to what he called the final examination. He said that everything we had faced before had been practice, and now we would learn what humans could really do." Lisa made notes as the alien told them about the orbital defenses. Humans had turned their space stations into weapons platforms and filled orbital space with mines disguised as debris. But the real surprise came when the Vorthan fleet tried to land troops on the surface. "Every landing site was a trap," Zekthara said. "Your people had spent months preparing the ground, turning Earth itself into a weapon. When our ships touched down, the ground would explode beneath them. When our soldiers tried to advance, buildings would collapse in carefully planned ways to crush them." The alien described urban warfare unlike anything the Vorthans had experienced. Human civilians fought alongside soldiers, turning every street into a battlefield. Children who should have been evacuated instead served as messengers and scouts. Elderly humans who could barely walk taught younger fighters how to make explosives. "From household items, we captured a human school in what you call New York," Zekthara said. "Inside, we found weapons hidden in every classroom, escape tunnels dug beneath the playground, and defensive positions built into the cafeteria. Even your children had been prepared to fight us." Jake felt a mixture of pride and sadness as he listened. The war had forced humanity to weaponize everything, even their innocence. But it had also shown what humans could accomplish when their survival was at stake. "The worst fighting was in the underground," the alien continued. "Your subway systems, your sewers, your basement levels. Humans moved through spaces we could not fit into, attacking from directions we could not defend against. They knew every tunnel, every pipe, every hidden passage." Zekthara told them about the battle for the Pentagon, where human forces had held out for 3 weeks against overwhelming odds. The building had been turned into a maze of defensive positions, with each room requiring a separate assault. By the time the Vorthons finally took it, they had lost more soldiers than in any previous battle. "But the building was empty," the alien said. "The humans had evacuated all important personnel through tunnels we never found. It spent 3 weeks and 2,000 lives capturing an empty shell." Lisa looked up from her notes. "How did your soldiers respond to this kind of fighting?" "They began to break," Zekthara said simply. "Warriors who had conquered galaxies started to refuse orders. Some of our best troops requested to be sent home rather than continue fighting on Earth. Others simply stopped functioning as combat units." The alien described what human psychologists would recognize as mass combat stress reaction. Vorthan soldiers who had never shown fear began to panic at the sight of human children. Veterans of 100 battles would freeze when entering human buildings. Some units had to be withdrawn from combat entirely. "Our commanders realized we were destroying our own army," Zekthara said. "Every day we stayed on Earth, we lost more soldiers to madness than to human weapons. Your people were not just defeating us in battle, they were defeating us in our minds." Jake listened as the alien told them about the final straw. A group of human prisoners had been held in a Vorthan command ship in orbit around Earth. Despite being outnumbered 50-1 and having no weapons, they had somehow taken control of the vessel and crashed it into another ship in the fleet. The leader of that group was a human teacher named Carol Stone. Zekthara said. She had no military training, no combat experience, but she convinced 30 other prisoners to sacrifice their lives to strike at us one last time. The alien paused, its natural eyes blinking in that strange pattern. That was when our high command understood the truth. We were not fighting soldiers or even warriors. We were fighting an entire species that had decided death was better than surrender. Made careful notes as Zekthara described the surrender. It had not come from military defeat, but from the realization that the Vorthan Empire could not afford to win. Even if they conquered Earth, the cost would destroy their civilization. General Webb accepted our surrender in the ruins of what you call Washington, D.C., the alien said. I was there, part of the delegation. I expected him to be happy, to celebrate his victory. Instead, he just looked tired. Jake knew that look. He had seen it in the eyes of every human veteran he had ever met. The look of someone who had done what was necessary but taken no joy in it. Webb told us something I will never forget, Zekthara continued. He said that humans did not want to be good at war, but they were very good at it anyway. Said that peace was what humans really wanted, but they would fight forever if they had to. The alien looked directly at Jake, its cybernetic eye focusing with mechanical precision. Then he asked us a question that still haunts my dreams. He asked us what we thought would happen if another species tried to conquer humanity in 100 years after you had learned from fighting us. The interview room fell completely silent. Jake found himself thinking about that question and not liking the answers his mind provided. What message would you give to other species who might consider conflict with humanity? Lisa asked, repeating the same question that had ended every official interview with Vorthan survivors. Zekthara was quiet for a long moment, then spoke with what sounded like genuine fear in its translated voice. Tell them that humans do not just fight wars. They become war. They turn every person, every building, every idea into a weapon. They make war itself into something that serves their will to survive. The alien stood slowly, its legs clicking against the floor. Tell them that we called it pure hell, because hell is a place where suffering never ends. That is what war becomes. When humans fight it, it never ends, and it never stops getting worse for their enemies. Jake watched as the guards escorted Zekthara from the room. When the door closed, he and Lisa sat in silence for several minutes, both lost in thought about what they had just heard. Will this testimony help bring peace? Lisa asked finally. Jake looked at the recording device, still blinking its blue light. I think it will make sure everyone understands why peace is the only choice. Outside the window, the stars of the galaxy twinkled peacefully, and Jake wondered if they would stay that way now that everyone knew what humans could become when threatened.